Good morning, all. I would like to welcome each of you to the 6th meeting of the 4th virtual public hearing of the Joint Select Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commissions and Statutory Authorities, including the THA of the 12th Parliament. I am Dr. Varmadiyal Singh, Chairman of this Joint Select Committee. And today our function is to look at the functioning of various, our function in this committee, really the Joint Select Committee, is to look at the functioning of various boards to see if they're fulfilling their mandate, what challenges exist to do, and how best we can assist the board and their members to serve the public, in any sort of way that could give their true meaning, their true mandate to serve the public. So today we have the pleasure having the esteemed presence of members of the CIBC and the officials from the aligned ministry, and Ministry of National Security. So I'd like to welcome you to this morning deliberations. And in Trinidad and Tobago, crime can affect our physical health, our emotional well-being, our finances, our work, our social lives. And we realize that victims of crimes are suffering. We have, a crime detection and conviction rate that leaves a lot to be desired. We know that as a society. And sometimes the perpetrators are never caught. Other times the wheel of justice turns at such a stale space. And it seems that the very systems which are set up to serve and protect the victims of crime or protect citizens have fallen short. It is as if the systems we have now further victimize the victim. But compensation to the victims would show that we are a caring society, and we can still go a little way in assisting their recovery. The persons who are domestically abused can now be empowered. Victims nursing injuries experiencing financial loss, even dependents of murdered victims can seek assistance in their time of grief. So I consider this committee as a so-called empathy committee, and you have the power to show that we could recognize the plight of the victims and the power to show as a society we can help these individuals to move forward in their lives. So I thank you all for being here, and at this morning's deliberation, I would now ask members of the CIBC to introduce themselves, starting with their chairman, Mr. Alvin Pascal. I think. I think we're having some technical issues, which was unfortunately the reason for our delayed start. So I would like to go on to the officials of the Ministry of National Security, starting with Mr. Gary Joseph, Permanent Secretary. Could you introduce yourself and your staff, please?
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Gary Joseph, and I'm the Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of National Security. And with me, I have
Brian George Thomas, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary for Defense and Protective Services.
Thank you for being here. Is the officials of the Criminal Injuries Compensatory Board available at the present? Again, we are having some technical, so they are having some technical difficulties in.
Good morning, Chair.
We have you here. Good. Thank you.
Chairman, we are at disadvantage. We didn't hear your opening remarks at all.
Well, my opening remarks was really saying that you all have such a great function in society, because we have victims of crime who feel that the whole system is beating them up, in the sense that the slow pace of justice, the fact that, they are sometimes innocent persons going about their lives and are victims of crimes, and they feel that the system is further victimizing them. So in my opening remarks, I was thinking that your committee, your body, has a great deal to play in helping individuals recover from crime, helping them in any little way that they can feel that somebody is there to be with them, to help them along, via compensation, via other means where we can get therapy to them. So with that, I would like you to introduce yourself and your committee, so we members of the public would know who we have on board with us this morning.
You calling on us? All right. Chairman, this is Alvin Pascal. I'm the chairman of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Unit. Permit me just to introduce the members of the board first, Chairman. Sure. Because it's important with the effectiveness of and efficiency of the entity. Sure. Chairman, the board at the moment comprises of 7 members. We have here on the board Dr. Krishna Maharaj, he's a clinical psychologist. We have Ms. Christine John Guy, she's a senior public servant. We have Commander Dr. Israel Dowlat, who is a medical doctor. We have Ms. Kimoy Thomas, an attorney at law. We have in public practice. And we have Ms. Sasha Franklin Wilson, attorney at law in private practice. She is sitting with us virtually this morning too. We have Ms. Crystal Edwards, a public officer appointed by the Tobago House of Assembly. Sitting here with this morning as head of the unit is Mr. Lester Tom. He is in the position as the secretary, the senior officer, the chief officer for the time being, because the chief officer being the secretary of the board, we are without a chief officer at the moment. Also, that's here is Mrs. Marlene Riley Mohammed. She deals with the accounts, and we have Mr. Tishara Mills Odin, who is a social work specialist. Yes. Sure. And we are still disadvantaged, Chairman, because we don't have any video. We are disadvantaged. We don't have any video. We are virtually operating from the cell phone.
Sure. Okay. Well, we will try our best to proceed. So I understand. So then there's Ms. Sasha Franklin, member is also here present with us, right? So,
good morning, Chair. I am also present this morning.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for. Yeah. So I have to thank you members for being with us today. And I think you realize you have such an important part to play in our country. And I was gratified. And I was gratified that you mentioned the other members who are present, and we will go into that in further details later, your breakdown of your committee members. But at this stage, I would like the officials of the Ministry of National Security, Mr. Gary Joseph, the acting permanent secretary, if you can give us some brief opening remarks, please.
Okay. Good morning once again, Chair and members of the committee, as well as to the viewing and listening public. The Ministry of National Security, having primary responsibility for the safety and security of our nation, is pleased to appear today to provide support to the committee in its inquiry into the efficiency and effectiveness of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. The board, which was established by the Criminal Injuries Compensation Act, is primarily responsible for the payment of some monetary compensation to victims of criminal injuries. And the act applies to persons who suffer injuries as well as dependents of a person who dies. The Ministry of National Security is the line ministry with responsibility for the board and provides general oversight to the board, which may take the form of meetings, reports, audits, monitoring and evaluation. Just to put some context into what has been happening here at the ministry, as you may be aware, the ministry is a very large and complex organization. And as a result of this wide area of control, the ministry has 2 permanent secretaries, myself being one who is also the accounting officer. Recently, the board was placed under my portfolio within the last 6 months or so. I would just want to add finally that the ministry has been, the last year has been very challenging for the ministry with the COVID-19 pandemic. And you all would be aware that the ministry has taken a frontline role in terms of border security. And that whole exemption process. We have also been challenged as a result of dampened economic activity and concomitant reductions in allocations. Mr. Chair, I would like to thank you now for the opportunity, and we stand ready to provide whatever support we can to the deliberations of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. And at this stage, would Mr. Alvin Pascal, the chair of the CICB, give us some brief opening remarks, please?
Permit me by way of introduction. I have taken the time off to set down the members of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board and the unit. How we operate, Chairman, is that there is a board as appointed, and there are 7 members, and we call that board. There is a unit, which is the administrative arm of the Criminal Injuries Compensation, which sees towards the administration of the entity. So, and from time to time, you may hear speak of the board. There are times you may hear speak of the unit, and there are times you may hear speak of criminal injuries compensation. They're all one and the same entity we speak of. The criminal injuries, the unit is headed by the secretary, and when one looks at the Criminal Injuries Compensation Act 21 of 1999, you would see in there that that act only catered for one staff member, which is the secretary. You will see that at part 3 of the act and at section 14. The other members of the unit, which is the administrative arm, were appointed by cabinet minute. So the authority for the appointment of those members of staff is via cabinet minute. That cabinet minute is dated 2014, September 18, 2014, okay, by cabinet minute. For the staff members wouldn't be found in the statute itself, but it will be found in a cabinet minute. Yeah. Chair and members of the board have acceded to your invitation to join you so that all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago could have a better understanding of the workings of the criminal injuries compensation. So on behalf of the criminal injuries, I thank you for the opportunity. We do hope that our written submissions and our personal appearance, although will make the workings of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board better known to all the citizens of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Chairman, I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pascal. And I would like to mention that our discussions here today is to really see how we can move forward in helping the citizens, and whatever you need, be it staff, because you had mentioned you had problems, with the legislation providing for just one member staff. I think you mentioned the secretary. So all these things we need to look at and probably make recommendations to the your line ministry. So I would like to remind members that the committee members and officials to direct your questions through the chair, and to please activate your microphones on a device when you acknowledge, and turn it off after you have concluded your contribution. And at this stage now, I would like to start the ball rolling by just asking a question to Mr. Pascal. Mr. Pascal, I think you had mentioned that you have been running without a secretary, that your research officer seems to be doing a lot of the work that was designated to the secretary. Could you explain why is there no secretary on the board? What is the problem? Is it a delay from the line ministry or the CPO's office? Yeah, we're not hearing. If you can please kindly connect with audio with your device that you have, thanks. Audio only, thanks.
We did well. Right. Mr. Chairman, we continue to suffer some device problems on this side. But Mr. Chairman, if you look at the statute speaks in terms of a secretary, which is supposed to be the chief officer or the chief executive of the entity. But when you look at the qualification required, she's supposed to be the accounting officer. But when you look at the qualification required is that of an accounting technician. That being so has thrown the whole org chart of the entity out of sync, because you find that there are persons in the organization who is coming into the organization, comes in at higher salaries, as the case may be, than that person holding the post of secretary. We have had many hours of discussion with the chief personnel officer on this point. Many hours of hours we have spent working on this matter, but we were without success. But in this last period, we have been working with our current PS, Mr. Joseph, and we have been much advanced. So we are looking forward very soon to have the wherewithal to fill that position, so as to bring the org chart back into alignment. But I just say, Mr. Chairman, that our Mr. Tom carries his substantive position, yet he carries all the functions of the secretary, and we do our best to keep the ship afloat for the time being, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you for that, and we have to probably thank Mr. Tom for doing such a good role in trying to do two jobs. So at this stage, I'd like to see what posts are currently vacant. If you can give me an idea of the posts in your organization that are vacant.
Yes.
Because
if I'm right, there are 3 vacant positions: that of the secretary and 2 business operation officers. Those are the 2 posts that are vacant at the moment, pursuant to the org chart or the cabinet note.
And is the existing staff complement sufficient to service the needs of the CICB?
I would say no, Mr. Chairman. I would say no. We are short of 2 staff, which we are unable to hire longer term. But I think we do a bit of short term hiring to fill those positions for the time being. And except for the secretary, which is the chief officer, we think that the staff is reasonably sufficient for the time being.
In light of COVID-19, what sort of measures have your staff implemented when members of the public come to visit you? Because I understood that I don't think you have developed any sort of online acquisition of forms that people could get it right. Yeah. So I think people still need to visit your office to get forms and to fill out these forms. What sort of staff rules have been revised to reflect the current, reliance on technology and minimize interaction?
Chairman, I will yield to Mr. Tom for assistance in this regard.
Mr. Chairman, we have used the internet in terms of email addresses. So when persons contact us via email or via phone, we issue them the emails with the application forms, right? At one time, we had a presence on the ministry website where the forms were available to be downloaded. But I think due to the ministry reconfiguring its website and all of that, it still has to be uploaded. All right, but persons have contacted us. We must say via email. We had persons contact us via Facebook. We also had persons contacting us, and we would ask them for a email address, and we would issue the forms to persons via email. We also have forms available at particular police stations and the victim support unit, which persons can pick up those forms. All right, the forms are also available in the act, which is available to the general public via the Ministry of Legal Affairs website. So that's the means in which persons have been.
Question, please, just a follow up on that. Mr. Tom, apart from providing the documents to the persons who are interested in applying, is there any mechanism at present where you can receive the completed application forms and supporting documentation electronically?
Yes, we have also received application forms with the supporting documents via email. So we have said to persons, you can upload, you can scan, you can take, we find that photos from the camera, from our phones, take better pictures than scanning. So we have said that you can take a photo of your documents and send it to us via email.
And this is processed so that the person, the applicant, doesn't actually have to come physically.
Have to come in, that's right.
Thank you. How long has this been happening? Is this a COVID-19 type?
Yes, during COVID-19, we really didn't have much persons via email. Maybe if someone was overseas, we would have received it via that means. Or, but however, we had drop boxes in San Fernando. That's the legal aid and advisory. We had drop boxes, a drop box in Tobago, one in Arima at the legal aid and advisory.
And do you anticipate any sort of, I mean, lots of government agencies, judiciary and all that, they've built out platforms now because of COVID to deal with the electronic submission of documents. Do you foresee the board as, in the near future undertaking something like that can have a sort of platform where you can complete forms online and upload your documents and have a more, something like a acknowledgement system and all of those things rather than just using email? Do you think that that's something you all would like to explore?
Yes, certainly. We actually were in talks with our IT department concerning building a platform, and it was possible. But I think at the time they were doing the immigrants, they were doing the immigrants process of filing for that exemption. So they said to us, once they have a window, they will work with us in providing that platform on the ministry website.
Okay.
Mr. Pascal, could any member of your team give us an idea of the amount of applications you had before your committee in the last 3 years? And do you find the applications are diminishing in number, or give us just an idea of the how it is going in terms of what's coming before you?
We did in fact allude to that in our written submission, but we were the legal changes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, in terms of receipt of applications, in the fiscal year 2016 to 2017, we received 277 applications. In the fiscal year 2017 to 18, we would have received 178 applications, and in fiscal year 2020, we would have received 138 applications. Of course, we suppose that the decrease in last year in particular would have been because of COVID. In fact, the crime rate actually went down. So, you know, in terms of activity over that year, we know our activities as a nation did, well, in some cases, slow significantly. The next part, could you repeat the next part of the question?
No, I was looking actually at the pattern that you had and looking at the disbursements, because I saw in 2020 you paid out like 1,182,250.
Right.
And in 2019, $181,033. So just trying to get the pattern.
Okay, understood. In 2019, there wasn't an active board at that time. So then no decisions were made. Therefore, we have that reduction in 2019.
Yeah. Yeah, could you repeat that? We're not okay into.
Oh.
Sure.
Yes, I was saying in 2019 there was a disbursement of 181,033. But however, there wasn't an active board in 2019, so that no decisions were made. Therefore, the disbursement could not have been released when there was no decisions.
Thank you for that. And I'm hoping the Ministry of National Security hears about the fact that, you know, when one board is finished, if there's not a timely appointment of another board, it can lead to a level of distress for a new board coming in to deal with that work, and also for members of the public needing any sort of service. I think we have a question due from one of our members. I think Ms. Ayana Webster-Roy, do you have a question I think you wanted to pose to the committee?
Based on the information submitted and the response we just received, what do you think, because I'm looking at the trends, what do you think would account for the low number of applications coming into the CICB? And also, what do you think that the CICB could do to address the factors that you would highlight in your response? Mr. Pascal, you heard my question?
Yes, I heard your question, but it's just trying to resolve.
Yes.
I don't know if it could be said that a low amount of applications are coming in, because as a board member, we meet twice a month, and every month we do 30 cases. 40 cases we do every month. We have 2 meetings per month, and we do 40 cases. So I find it wouldn't be so easy to say that there's a low amount of application coming in by this member.
Mr. Pascal, I'm hearing that, you know, you have been meeting, and I think you are scheduled to meet twice a month. Is that?
Twice a month, Chairman.
Yeah, and at 3 different locations, I think Port of Spain, Tobago, and San Fernando.
We could meet at either of those, Chairman.
Yeah, so
Either, yeah.
Because according to, I think when I looked at the act itself, I think they mentioned that the 3 places you are supposed to meet. Now with the COVID, I understood this may be a little a challenge, but then I think you would have put in place a virtual setup also if people need to give their give their request or their in. So do you have any virtual setups? that members of the public could actually bring their applications to you?
Chairman, we weren't too clear on your question because we think we answered a question like that from Senator Mr. Dutch.
What did you say?
Senator Dutch, yes. Wasn't that question before? Yes.
Mr. Pascal, do you find that members of the public are aware of your committee? I mean, it's an important committee. I remember once going to like certain health fairs and seeing the actual pamphlets from, you know, the compensation board, you know, telling members of the public they can apply. But do you think you are really reaching out to the public, or do you think there's a greater need for public awareness for your organization?
In fact, this was so timely on your invitation to us, Mr. Chairman. It was so timely because our last 2 meetings or 3 meetings, those were the discussions as to our going out and to outreach and to do a little bit more advertisement. But Mr. Chairman, we feel so well advertised in that, you know, even when you walk into these buildings here, you will find our pamphlets downstairs. You go to the Forensic Science Center, you will hear people speak of us and you hear applicants making referrals. We have victim support, people at the victim support unit. We have the police units, the prisons. We feel there's always room for further advertisement. There's always room, but we feel fairly safe that we are well represented outside here, Mr. Chairman.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us, like let's say within the last year, or is there any way for you to measure how many applications were received from persons who were provided with information directly through CTPS and victim support units? I mean, is there some sort of parts that does victim support unit forward forms onto you on behalf of persons that they might be dealing with? Can you measure then? Can you actually measure the effectiveness of the victim support unit in terms of creating an avenue for people and creating awareness of your function? Or is it just that you know that they have the forms and you assume that they are disseminating the information?
Yes and no, member. The yes of that is we are able to do 30 applications per month. That is in itself, it has to be coming from somewhere. So
yeah, well, I'm not asking where they come from somewhere. I'm asking, can you measure exactly how many come through victim support unit? Because I'm trying to find out the effectiveness of the victim support unit in terms of creating awareness and assisting persons with making applications. So whether you see 30 or 60 or 100 a month, how many are actually coming through victim support? Can you tell?
Okay, we heard you, yeah.
Okay, yes, Ms. Medial. I would say about 50% of our cases come from the victim support unit. We don't have a measure as to all that come in from them, but we liaise with them. They would call us if they have any questions concerning the application. So we receive them on a regular basis from the victim support unit, that is.
Would they directly forward any of them to you, and would they?
Yes, they do. Yes.
And we could add that Ms. Mills worked at the victim support unit at one time. So there is a relationship established with them.
Sorry, you said what? Somebody worked there?
I said that Ms. Mills who is speaking to you now, she worked at the victim support unit at one time.
Sure.
There is a relationship that we have established with them.
So would you think, therefore, maybe in as a way of measuring then, for example, the effectiveness of your outreach, perhaps on each form or one of the forms that you say that you attach to the scheduled form here, perhaps you can ask persons then, how have you, how did the information about our role and function come to you? As just a suggestion, and that way, because, things need to be measured if you need to determine their effectiveness. So if you have no way of knowing if the form fall from the sky or if it came through victim support or if the person went online or if the person went on Facebook, perhaps it's a good way to measure how effective your community, and you can figure out then where the lapses might be occurring or what are the successes.
Yeah,
Yes,
we take your guidance there, Deborah.
Can I just do one
Very
question
helpful. Very helpful.
with respect to the application process?
Could you repeat the question?
No, Chairman, I'm speaking to Chairman.
Yes, sure, you can go ahead.
Go on, right, sure. I wanted to find out a little bit about, you said the difficulties experienced by persons in obtaining documents. Now, I know that the application has to be made within 1 year. When an application is made, if it doesn't contain all of the supporting documents from the applicant, the things that are listed in the act and other things, is there a time frame which you would give persons in order to submit the supporting documents that may be missing outside of the 1 year period?
Yes. So we do indicate to with the applicants that there is 1 year in which they will have to file their documents. We will accept the application with a police report, a medical report, and documents such as their identification and so on. But those two documents are the most important documents that we would need to accept the applications. Now, if there are other documents that we will require, we would accept what they submitted, but we would ask them to to forward these documents to us, whether drop it in or whether to send it. We would ask them to forward these documents. But we do accept the forms with particular documents omitted.
But, all right, but not the police report and the medical
Not the police report and the, yeah, we won't accept it. Neither the funeral expenses, because those are in the law, and we must have those documents to prove that a crime was committed, to prove that payment was made, or to prove that the person did have physical injury.
So outside of the 1 year period, let's say 1 year and 10 days outside of the date of the crime, if a person he still doesn't have the police report, for example, they would be barred except if they can show reasonable cause. And it's discretionary at that point whether to accept the application or not.
Yes.
But you identified in your submission here that persons are in fact having difficulties in obtaining some of these reports, medical reports and police reports.
Yes, and the board, the act makes provisions for persons to give just cause as to why their applications is late. So in the case where somebody come in a day, 1 month, they can write to the board stating why they have filed their applications late. And the board considers these reasons.
Do you find that particularly because you identified police, national insurance, board, welfare, medical reports, this is on page 2 of your submission, do you find that the difficulty with obtaining these reports are, very prevalent? I mean, how prevalent is it that someone will have to seek an extension beyond the 1 year period because of the absence of one of these critical reports that are listed in the Act?
It's very, very prevalent. You're asking
how prevalent is it? Is it a one-off, or is it that in several cases you find that persons come to make applications but they are having challenges with, I mean, if you don't have numbers, give me an idea. Is it just is it very rare? Is it very common? Is it,
let's say it's common. It's common.
It's common.
It's common, yeah. Okay,
so we definitely then have an issue with the with persons being able to access their statutorily required supporting documentation, and that's a challenge for persons who wish to access your services.
Yes, we can see that.
Have you communicated these challenges from what you are seeing to the relevant persons like the National Insurance Board, the police service, and I suppose, I don't know, the medical reports that they would require might be from what, DMOs or whoever else, doctors, Toronto Medical Association, regional health authorities. I know, for example, in my practice, sometimes getting medical records from the hospital, we have to take the hospital to court under Freedom of Information Act to get it when we want to file civil proceedings. So I know the challenge with that. Or have you all communicated to the health authorities, for example, that people are encountering difficulties with accessing your services because they cannot get their medical reports on time?
Yes, we have. I mean, over the years, we have communicated to various agencies. Sometimes we take it upon ourselves to make direct contact with the particular agency, whether it is a medical doctor, a DMO. We have made direct contact with some of these agencies in order to assist persons in getting the documents.
Okay. So if someone comes in, then you're saying without the documents and you know that the 1 year time is approaching, you all will actually reach out on your own volition to try to access the documents?
Not all the time. Not all the time. Yeah.
How do you choose?
How do we choose that? Well, all right. So somebody comes. A scenario might be the best way. The best way to get it. So somebody comes in and they would say that they do not have the police report. Why you don't have the police report? Well, I made the application and they told me to come back in 1 month's time. Okay, did you go back? No, I didn't. I did not go back. Well, back at that time, I did not see the officer. Did you? So we would allow the person to go out there and to do the needful on their part. All right. So it depends on the scenario. It depends on the scenario. But I know our investigating officers have been in contact with police officers to help clients get medical reports. Police reports, and in some cases, victim statements. All right, not just the police report. Right. So it depends on the particular case. All right, but that's an additional responsibility for our staff who are engaged in preparing reports and doing investigation to go for each single claim to acquire the information.
It also seems a little bit discretionary that one person could meet a staff member who will go the extra mile to access reports and reach out to the police and reach out to the hospitals or whoever it is to get things, and somebody else might encounter a staff member who will say, well, listen, this is what the act requires, and if you don't have it, too bad. So I mean, that discretionary nature of the service provided, I mean, it's not your responsibility. It is the responsibility of the person. But what I'm saying is, perhaps that's why the question was, have you communicated with the authorities to indicate that, look, when persons request these reports, it's, the delay is causing them to, or it's putting an additional burden on us to have to get it. So I think that that's why I asked the question.
Yes, our answer is yes, we have.
It shouldn't be left to the discretion of your staff whether they choose to reach out and choose to assist depending on circumstances, because that could lead to a wide variation in the level of service that someone will receive from the board.
Yeah, I mean, we must appreciate that all cases are the same. But we have reached out to the National Insurance Board. All right, we have also reached out to the police in assisting in getting reports. All right, I don't think there's any bias where clients are concerned. Our staff treat all applicants equal, so that to say that, or maybe to indicate that there is some level of bias, I don't think it's totally clear.
That there could be a variation in the level of service based on the exercise of a discretion by a particular, I don't know who you would deal with when you come in, for example, whether it would be a CSR or a business operations person, but what I'm saying is standard operating procedure should be X or Y. Maybe that level of discretion could lead to a variation in how applicants are treated. So anyway, let's move on. You indicated as well that the form has some challenges when persons, you said that the form needs amendment, that persons have difficulties in completing the form. This is in your submission. And question number 5, part B. in light of what you have said, have you approached the ministry or to make amendments to the scheduled form, and what are your suggestions for amendments to the form?
Any particular person?
No, anybody who, I don't know, I mean, it's your submission. So if you have a position that the form needs amendment, I assume you've...
So yes, our response is yes. Over the years, since we began in 2007, the board has spoken to several ministry personnel concerning the amendment of not only the forms, but also the Criminal Injuries Compensation Act. Some heard and some unheard, but we have made recommendations to these amendments.
Can you tell me what are some of the amendments you'd recommend to the form?
All right, so a simple contact information. All right, sometimes we have actually had persons submit forms without any phone contact, any email contact. So we cannot contact these persons via phone, neither email. All right, on the application form itself, I think I should have one here. Right? Yeah. Pardon? So on the application form it says, the form only says age, date, sex, but whose date and sex? Is it the victim or the applicant? Because in some cases, the victim is not the applicant, right? The victim has passed. So sometimes persons, they put their information, they put the victim's information, and it can cause some problems. So it has caused problems for us.
Okay.
So
yes, national security, could you give us any update as to whether or not consideration is being given to the suggestions for amendments to the act and specifically to the schedule in light of what the board has said, the board's representative has said?
Yeah. Well, I'm just hearing from Mr. Tom that submissions would have been made over the years. Like I indicated previously, I would have that portfolio would have come under me within the recent last 6 months or so. We could revisit with the board what submissions they would like to make as it relates to the forms, as well as any amendments to the act that are required. So we will await those amendments. We'll engage them further on it, and we will make the submissions to where they need to be made.
All right. The board indicated that, going back to Mr. Thom or Chairman, Mr. Pascal, you said about, with fairness and so on, and I noticed under Section 28, there's no appellate process for decisions of the board. Of course, it's not an ouster, but it's just there's no appeal tribunal, so to speak. But would you have had any instances where persons would have challenged decisions of the board before the court? Has any litigation ever been launched against the board as far as you're aware? Sorry?
The answer is no. We don't have it. There was never any litigation relative to the coming out of an award.
Of a decision. Okay. And is there any, in terms of, I assume that boards such as yours are feature around the world in different jurisdictions. Is there any sort of standard or measure in terms of transparency and accountability, or reporting standards or internationally acceptable standards and that guide your deliberations that you would use in order to protect yourself from allegations of, unfairness or bias or the usual type of, unreasonableness, etc. in terms of your decisions? So that if someone were to challenge a decision, that you could justify it and say that it's in accordance with X or Y. Is there any sort of internationally acceptable standard?
I recall a number of persons undertook research into entities that look like the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board worldwide. I'm England. But none of the criminal injuries compensation entities you will find existing has any shape or look like ours. Ours is, yeah. So I mean, I don't know of any standard operating practice.
Okay.
If you do find any, it wouldn't fit us at all, because you look at criminal injuries compensation board of the world is, I mean, they're totally different. They talk in terms of millions, they talk in terms of personal injuries, right? Or we only talk in terms of a compensation for.
Sure. Structure-wise, in terms of the research that was conducted, how do you find our structure under the legislation compares to international type structures? This is just because you raised it. I'm just curious. How do we compare?
I mean, if you look at the criminal injuries compensation board, I recall when this thing was doing, we were looking at the board of England, and that is totally different to us. It's almost like a court. It's almost like you're talking to the personal injuries. You use those factors. We can't and don't use those factors. When you look at the sum of money that we have to pay out, we have $25,000.
Mm-hmm. I'm getting to that, yeah. But so they conduct more like an actual judicial inquiry or judicial function, and conduct an inquiry and take evidence and so on in order to determine the appropriate award.
Ours is kind of expression.
Right. Based on assessment of the documentation mostly.
We do our best.
Sorry, do you ever actually interview the witnesses as a board, apart from what the staff of the board would do?
Yes.
Does the board sit and interview the applicants and so on?
Yes, we had that. At one time, we sat under Justice Justice Shafiq Shah, and he liked that procedure. And we, along that time, we used to interview persons. It is not the case has to be something where there's a necessity for us to need further information, but we always reserve the right to get all that information.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my next question, I think we kind of asked this already about the transitioning to an online submission platform or so on. But what about financially? Are you all in a position? I think you mentioned that you all were in talks with the ministry about getting the funding and so on to do something like that, especially in light of COVID, to make the submission process a little more, as opposed to email having I know that there are some entities, it's a form that, and some of the challenges you have with respect to persons putting in wrong data or leaving out information could be solved with our online platform, in terms of you must click and must complete certain aspects of it and upload certain things before the form could actually be submitted. So do you all have the ability, the finances available right now to sort of digitalize your process, or do you have an actual plan or rollout plan for a digitalized process? I know you mentioned it already, but if you could give me some more details on that.
I am not even sure what that will cost externally. What kind of finance? I know IT work is pretty much expensive. However, we did speak with our internal IT department, who I must say did help us to digitize our collection of information from our application forms, right? So we are really dependent on an internal process where the staff of the IT department would be engaged in preparing such. I'm not sure what it took to do the immigration. The immigration application process, right? But we were really dependent on the IT department from the ministry to do that. Yeah.
Okay. So PS, again, something else, I guess, in your new portfolio you could take note of. You mentioned as well, then let's move on, in terms of collaborative relationships, which I think is important for public awareness and so on, that you could explore the option of MOUs. Have you engaged with your stakeholders in terms of signing official MOUs that could perhaps formalize the process of completing applications, referring things, accessing documents and so on, like NIB, TTPS, regional health authorities and so on? would an MOU, you mentioned in your submission about an MOU, have you engaged them and discussed the terms of such an MOU?
The answer to that, member, is that there's no express MOU. I know we have the informal MOU where the parties get information, but there's no express MOU, nothing signed or nothing negotiated or prepared by
Right.
us.
I know that. You said in the submission that it could be done. So I'm asking, have you taken any steps towards exploring it as a formalized process? And so all the informal processes you spoke of where your staff would reach out and so on, have you all taken any steps towards formalizing that in the form of an MOU with, like, let's say TTPS, NIB and RHAs?
The answer is no, not for the time, member. But we will take it as a guidance from you, and we would continue to explore it.
Okay, those are my questions for the moment, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I would like to find out from your questions also, is there a time frame when you would be doing this, Mr. Pascal?
You mean that MOU issue, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I put this way, we are taking notes, and we would want to say to you, we will give you a better answer. We are going to move one time. We'll deal with it more like immediate. So we will go into mood immediately. It is something that is very, very, we took a guidance. We took the members' guidance.
Yeah, if I might respectfully interject, because I want the record to also reflect my support 100% in the necessity for the board to consider entering into these MOUs. And you see, it comes from a point made by member Lakshmi Dayal that I totally agree with. Remember, if there's no standard procedure relative to how an applicant is dealt with and the extent of the services that are rendered to them, especially those applicants who are having challenges in requiring, in obtaining documents that will satisfy this application. If there is no standard procedure, then of course the perception will always appear as if there's what applies to Peter may not apply to Paul. And at the end of the day, it's our obligation and the board's obligation to be able to fairly and justly deal with every single application that comes before you. And I respect, and so I agree 100% with member Dayal, Lakshmi Dayal's contribution relative to that perception of the application process may actually be deemed, I don't want to use the word unfair, but different standards may be applied to different applicants. Now, that being said, that is why I respectfully suggest that you must operate with urgency now in the consideration of this MOU. You see, what an MOU can do is, if you're able to create that relationship, a procedure, standard written procedure, and an agreement as it exists between yourself and these other stakeholders, that is where now the board and your investigation officers that you spoke about can then rely upon the said MOU, knock on the door of these individual agencies requesting their immediate assistance. Because to my mind, and I'm not saying this is the case with respect to your board, but it makes absolutely no sense to have a board in existence, an entity in existence, and our citizenry are still being locked out from getting access to the services being rendered because no fault of theirs. I myself, being an attorney at law, I faced challenges, just as member Lakshmi Dayal would have spoken about, when you're trying to get disclosed, when you're trying to get medical records. We know it is like pulling teeth sometime. And I just want the record to reflect that it is absolutely necessary. And I heard that the board indicated that they will act with due diligence and quickly, and I appreciate that. But coming back to the chairman's question, I believe we should also be given, as a committee, some deadlines, some timelines, as to when you intend to seriously explore these MOUs, because I can only see it certainly assisting our citizenry and persons who have been victims of these crimes and in their ability to access compensation for same. I
would also like to go back a bit in the process of the IT request for applications form, Mr. Chairman, that have you put in a request for these forms to your IT department? And if not, why? And if so, when will you do it? And at least give us another timeline for that, please.
Are you speaking about the forms to be digitized?
Yes, the forms that you said
Yes.
as well that you would ask the ministry's IT department to assist with. Have you made a request for that assistance as yet to the ministry?
Right. It wasn't done officially, but this is a conversation that we had with the manager of the IT department. Well, yeah.
Could you tell us how long ago that conversation took place?
It could be about 3 months. Yeah, it could be about 3 months. Yeah.
Yeah, can I request then? The PS has indicated that this is the assignment of this portfolio is recent. Could the PS provide us in writing a follow-up of all of the requests made for assistance, both in terms of IT and amendments to the law and the scheduled form? I'm sure someone had the portfolio before and can provide an update when these requests were made and what is the status of the requests. Because I am not satisfied that if requests, as the board has said, have been made, it's the same since it's in existence, that someone now coming in, that the request has to be made again and we have to start the process over again. It cannot be that every time a portfolio is reassigned, we are restarting processes. Everything that I've asked about today, MOUs and standard operating procedures and so on, came out of your submission. So they are obviously identified needs. And if the needs are being communicated, then I think it's important for us to know what's happening. Are they just sitting on a desk in a filing cabinet somewhere, or are they receiving attention? So I would like to request that the ministry provide us with an update as to all of, specifically the IT requests and the requests for amendments to legislation, when the requests were made and what is the status of the request, please.
Thank you, Member.
Chair, if I may just intercede for a second, please, in response to the concern expressed there by the member. I would just like to indicate that I think the member would have indicated there that submission would have been made to the ministry since the existence of the board. Now, I would just want to indicate that the board would have come to the Ministry of National Security in 2015. And just in referring back to what Mr. Tom indicated, he said submissions would have been made over the years. So from our end, we will need to check to see when those submissions were made and where exactly are they. Were the submissions made under the former Ministry of Justice? I am not sure. So we will need to check into it. And once the submissions were made to the Ministry of National Security, we will provide an update to the committee with respect to those submissions.
Thank you. I would like to direct this question to the Ministry of National Security members present. In your submission, you stated that the Ministry of National Security conducts a systemic monitoring by the Monitoring and Evaluation Unit of the Ministry through the development of a results framework for the CICB, which commenced tracking data from the CICB for 2019 to 2020. The question I have here is, what have been the key findings of this monitoring process under the following areas identified in your submission? 1, the number of public sessions held. Yeah. I have more questions after, so could you please give me some answers to that, please?
All right, thank you, Chair. Yes, the M&E unit had developed a framework by which they would have been able to track certain movements from baseline data as it relates to, and this baseline would have been primarily developed in 2020. They would have had information from that period. As it relates to the outreach sessions, I am seeing, based on the information provided to me, that there was nil in 2020. Some other information would have been the number of information packages just delivered to stakeholders In 2020, we would have had approximately 30. And the projection or the targets for 2021 would have been 60 packages. Similarly, some of the metrics going down. When we look at the number of applications in 2020, we had 138 applications being received, and our target for 2021 is in the vicinity of 200. So that is the process that would have been developed by our M&E unit, and the framework would have been, like I said, once the baseline data would have been obtained, we are now moving from that baseline and tracking progress in 2021 and onwards.
Thank you. And I would like to find out, your monitoring and evaluation unit in the ministry routinely assesses the board's performance in order to improve the current and future management of outputs, outcomes, and impacts. What has been the ministry assessment of the board's performance?
What I would add, Chair, is as Mr. Pascal would have indicated, the board from May of 2018 to December of 2019, a board wasn't in existence. Then coming into 2020, we were faced with COVID-19 measures. There was lockdowns and so forth. So the board has not or was not meeting as they should have been due to those COVID measures. So what we are seeing now is, as a result of some relaxation and the board being able to meet more frequently, regularly, they have been able to increase their review of applications. So I think we'll probably need to have a little more time in order to measure the performance of the board and what the board is doing. But certainly our M&E unit has been continually monitoring what is being done at the level of the board in terms of submission of reports and so. And we will continue from on our end, our oversight function, to look at the work that's being performed by the board and see how best we could assist in improving what they are doing.
Does the board have any technology to meet online? I mean, this is the way to go now. Have they been meeting online? How many meetings have been held recently in the last year or so?
Yes, certainly. The board has been meeting online, and that is its mode of meetings currently.
So, well, I think the peer said you are not able to meet, so we are trying to figure if there were actually online meetings. I'm trying to just clear up that.
So I mean, there might be some misunderstanding there, because the board would meet online. However, I think the deficiencies would come in terms of engaging with the public. One, for investigating officers to conduct personal interviews. Two, for persons to walk into the head office or any one of the units that we identify for assistance. So let's say like legal affairs, there were some concerns about persons coming directly during the COVID to drop off information. So I think there is where the limitations were in terms of direct access, personal contact, where persons will have to either collect a form or drop off a form, or to go to an institution to get a report, as the case may be. There is where I think the limitations are, and not so much on the board ability to have meetings. Because I must say that the board has increased the amount of cases during 2020. Right? At one time, from a month, Chair, are you hearing me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, right. So I'm saying that the board has actually increased the amount of cases that it reviewed in 2020. So whereas they would have reviewed 20 cases in prior years per month, now they have actually doubled that. We would say by 100%. So now it's 40 cases that they are reviewing because, of course, because of the backlog, they had decided to increase the amount, and I think that is noteworthy and commendable.
Yes, I think with your constraints of staff shortages, I see that is in fact commendable, and I'm thinking, but you know, the online meetings has to be to the public has to be something of great importance, because with COVID, crime really didn't take a holiday. We could see from the statistics. So we need to get something there better. Comment from the discussions previously. Remember, Lachmidial mentioned about the appeal decisions, but the UK, even though it has a different system, their compensatory board, they already have in existence, given reasons. If you have to review a decision, you have that processor available. If persons want to appeal a decision, and even given reasons why their compensation may be refused or reduced. So probably in terms of fairness, probably in terms of transparency, we may have to develop a system where persons will see strict guidelines, where a case was done with person A, and person B also could follow those same schematics. So I think probably the publication of how persons got through and succeeded may be something we have to look at. Also, we may have to look at somehow reviewing the act to give a review of decisions, appeal of decisions that may have to be there for persons who feel aggrieved and they were not somehow felt dealt fairly. Another factor that came out is when Member Lachmidial mentioned that, the 1 year seems to be a bit, that 1 year seems to be given some challenges in getting reports. But even I think in Canada, in Manitoba, there's a 2 year limit, a 2 year period which a claim must be entertained, and also in Ireland. So we may have to look at increasing that 1 year limit to a 2 year limit. But I need to ask a question though. In terms of injury, let's look at the practical injury. Let's say there's a victim who has been raped. They are now having post-traumatic stress disorder. They would have that mental distress. That may not manifest within a year, 2 years. Do you have any sort of procedure where you may look at that person who has been raped, and or even any crime where the trauma now comes on after, and you could actually get the documents from the psychiatrist, documents from the hospital? Do you have that level where persons could lay claim sometimes even 3 years after an incident has occurred?
Chairman, I'll try to respond to that. That has a lot to do with the quantum that is being paid. But if you have $25,000, which is the limit, the amount that you have to pay in all circumstances, all intimately, what we do in a case like rape, we have looked at the traumas, the psychological issues, and most time we usually grant high figures for those. When I say high figure up to the 25,000 threshold. So there's not a few times where there's much money left from that 25,000. So having paid out that 25,000, our issues are complete. We don't really have any anything more to do with a case like that. We have paid what the statute have asked us to pay that person. We have looked at that person's case. We feel that she might be a person who is entitled to the maximum. Having paid that maximum, that has to be the end for us. You see, if it was an open pool, then you would have wanted to look at quantum to say, well, look, wait until the injuries actually show itself for you to really compensate.
Well, we may have to actually look at that figure, right? Because I mean, people can apply for, I think, up to 25,000, but you may not give them the full 25,000. You may give them less. And in certain cases, you can appeal to the minister to increase it to 50,000. How many cases did you apply to the minister to go up to the 50,000? Could you give me an idea of the figure, and what sort of cases did you have to reach out to the minister to get that greater amount, if you did in fact reach out to the minister?
I recall during my tenure on this board, having raised this issue with the line ministers as to that quantum. You never get any responses or any traction on that figure. I want to believe that the Minister of Finance probably saying that's what I have to give, really. So we have, I could say, over the period that I've been around for a while, we have made many overtures to all line ministers to make overtures to the Minister of Finance, and we have had that. In fact, the example I could give you is the case of the grains. There were some foreign nationals who were injured in Tobago, and they wanted more than the maximum. And we had we have to have a discussion with the Minister of Finance. It had reached the Minister of Finance, and there were no amendments to that figure. We were unable to pay anything above the maximum figure.
So in the cases with the foreign national, did you get the quantum of 50 or not? I didn't hear.
No, we got 25, but we only got it 25 figure. If we pay for two persons, we ended up paying for two persons. Each individual was entitled to 25,000.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in a sense, that may be comforting, because if you're not giving your locals maximum and you go to give the foreigners maximum, it may cause some sort of levels of discrimination for your own nationals. But I was pleased to hear that even the American embassy has a foreign alert where they actually inform their American citizens that if you have been a victim of violent crime when visiting or living in Trinidad and Tobago, you may be eligible for compensation from your board. So this is actually on their website. And I'm asking now, let us say someone has applied, like a foreigner, has applied for this. How timely would the payouts be? Like in that instance, is it that the persons leave their shores, and are the money that given, is it given in foreign currency or TT dollars?
We have that. We have. Chair, we have a process where each application receives a number, and so the applications are treated via the date of submission. That's, we won't pull an application that came in recently and skip over applications that were waiting. All right. In the case where a wire transfer is required, that has been facilitated by the respective ministries that we were under.
Thank you. I would like to find out, give us an idea in terms of practicality. If, in terms of a person who has lost a earner, like so the breadwinner of their home, the children, if a child is a survivor, could that child via an adult apply for some sort of compensation?
Indeed, Chairman. And that is a figure as a policy. We pay $10,000 to a child from maintenance or dependency, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Yes.
Just one question. Have you all considered in terms of amendments to the legislation and the whole scheme of things, coming up with different types of compensation schemes? For example, I don't want to use the word a trust fund, but something like making provision for children's education where the breadwinner is deceased, monthly subventions, as opposed to a one-off maximum $25,000 payment. I can't even contemplate what I would do with $25,000, if anything at all, if my parents were to die and I were in school, or, something like that. It's a very limited amount. It's a one-off payment. You basically could pay for a funeral with $25,000 and have a little bit extra to buy, I don't know, bread and cheese for the week. So I don't know what, have you all considered different schemes to cater for, like, let's say, example, a rape victim who becomes pregnant and has a child and has to take care of this child for the rest of their life, or a young child who is about to start high school and wants to go into university, but the breadwinner of the family is deceased. Are these different types of compensation schemes that you all have contemplated as being, as proposals that would, I know it would require a lot of legislative amendments, but is that something that you all see as a future for the board?
The act doesn't provide for it, but we have done things like that. Remember, we can recall certain persons in the hotel school and paid for them out of their grants. And other cases, we have put monies into the unit trust. We ask them to open a unit trust. Yeah.
What's the maximum of the 25,000?
The maximum.
I don't think so. Additionally, I think the board has awarded in trenches.
Yeah, we did do some tranches too, yeah. Make payments in tranches.
So you do have some flexibility in terms of how much you can make provision and how you can have it done and so on.
Well, members, you will see, we were constrained within this statute, but we use our best to bend and twist to ensure that.
Right. So the question is, do you think that some sort of amendments to the legislation would facilitate you less having to work around the law and then, or not work around the law, but you know what I mean? Find ways. But do you think that amendments to build out some more substantive schemes and, as it were, to provide assistance in these different types of scenarios would be useful and maybe something you should consider?
Yes, it is necessary. We would consider it because we have actually in practice did it in form.
Having a formalized system by which you can make a monthly award or an award in terms of for educational purposes and so on, having it in the law and having that authority via the law might actually be a lot more, because again, you can have the issue of it being said that it's so discretionary. It can be sometimes, somebody can think it's unfair and can make the allegation that it's unfair in terms of the board chooses how to get around certain things and do things in a way that aren't formal in terms of a structure. And people can allege that you have different strokes for different folks. And that's something you want to avoid as a public authority.
Yeah, you remember it is good guidance. We have noted it.
One other question I have before because I think it's after 12. With respect to these scheduled offences, they are all violent offences, and I know that is really the remit of the board. Have you all considered as well because we talk about mental strain and so on, and mental injury and psychological injury, and it was mentioned by, of course, Dr. Dial Singh. But what about white-collar crime, victims of white-collar crime who may seek compensation? Have you all given any consideration to expanding the list of scheduled offences to include persons who are victims of, let's say, because sometimes I know that these things, sometimes people willingly participate in certain activities and they may find themselves becoming victims. But there are some of them that, it's in fraud cases, they do have a severe impact financially upon persons, especially vulnerable people in our society, like the elderly. Is there any consideration, or has any consideration been given to expand the list of offences to include non-violent offences such as fraud and those things?
The answer I will give to that is no, member. And once again, we will take note for and canvass it. It may be a good policy decision.
Mr. Pascal, Member Lashmidial mentioned about someone who gets pregnant, for instance, in the Commission for Rape. And looking at that child, I think there is certain jurisdictions which do in fact give support to that pregnancy. So then that is something that I guess you may have to look at in your recommendation to the Ministry of National Security. That's another ambit that you can look on. And I just want to look at Toronto. Toronto, in fact, their Criminal Injuries Compensation Board was eliminated, and they replaced it by a Victim Quick Response Program. But what is admirable about this? While I think our legislation thinks you have to have a report just from the police service, from the Commissioner of a Crime, they also have increased their level of reporting, in the sense that it's not just the police service. They already have brought under their system if their Child Protection Authority can also give a report for consideration. The Domestic Violence Shelter, Sexual Assault Center, and certain hospital agencies can also be a source of an information, not just a police report. So I think this is something you may have to look on to, because we have the Children's Authority here, and they may get reports also. So I guess this is something of increasing the ambit of that. And strange enough, their system now, they look at even emergency home safety expenses. So if there's at your home, there's a burglary, your door is smashed, your window is smashed, they give assistance to that victim to fix their door, to put in a burglar proofing. So that practical assistance expenses, they look at besides traveling and related expenses, and even crime scene cleanup, removal of hate crime, graffiti, or even victims who may have a murder in their home, all that blood cleanup, they give a grant very quickly to those victims. So I think these are ways that we may have to look forward, because we have those challenges that persons in our society have. And so I would like to just get your comment on the fact that, any sort of increases in your portfolio that can help the victims. I'm thinking it's something that we welcome, because even recently I must just want to draw your attention there that in London, £23,000 damages for a woman who was raped by an ex-partner. And this came out on the 13th of November, 2019. And the woman described how she broke down in tears after being awarded damages by a government scheme which supports victims of crime, despite her alleged attacker being found not guilty in a criminal court. And I think this to me is something that we should be moving towards, because she said she felt let down by the legal system, but it was never really getting the compensation, was never really about money. It was about someone somewhere listening to me and helping me. So your board does have that function also. And I see your psychologist on board is Dr. Krishna Marad. So even though we have the victim support unit, I think the compensation given to these members of the public, there was another one, damages secured for a woman abused as a child in a family home. And she secured a £16,000 after she had been molested at the age of between 7 and 9 by her elder half-brother 50 years ago. So again, these are cases where you found that the empathy for society, the empathy of the government's body. And she said compensation can't change what happened to me or give me my childhood back, but it can bring someone some closure to it all, which I feel has been done in that case. So I'm asking you, do you think we could increase even the amount of money allocated? Because you have a civil attorney on board, and I'm sure he or she knows there's a disconnect between the judicial system and the $25,000 that we are handed out. So do you have any plans, or could you, in fact, see what we have been discussing here this morning to see how we can probably look at the act, change any changes? And do you have any plans that you would, want to put on board or to bring to the line ministry, who is also here?
That response is going to give you, Mr. Chairman. I think, yes, sir, there's a great need for amendments in this area. I mean, this act has been there since 1999. And this act was passed for a purpose. In fact, the purpose of this act was to give some consolation to victims while the criminals were getting all the international protections. This act was passed for victims. So yes, Mr. Chairman, what I intend to do after today is to make contact with the online ministry, and we will have to put formal, something formal into gear for the amendment of this act. It may be that this has to go to the Law Reform Commission.
Good. So I want to just direct a question to you again, sir. In your submission, you stated that in accordance to the CIBC Act, the board submits a draft estimate of expenditure to the line ministry and furnishes an annual report. When was the last annual report submitted to the Ministry of National Security?
The last annual report covered the period of 2018 to 2019. 2018. Right, so that, I mean, I can't remember the date offhand. All right, right, so the last annual report is 2017 to 2018. 2018 would have been when that board had expired. All right, so that was the last annual report, 2017, 2018.
Sure, okay. I just want to ask a question. When you are actually getting your files and documentation, you depend on the unit from the police. I think it's CAPA you call it. Are there any challenges in getting, because we mentioned medical reports take a while to come, but do you get any sort of challenges in getting reports back in time from that police unit?
Yes, we have been experiencing some difficulty within recent times. However, through our line ministry and through the PS, we have been able to refoster those communication lines so that we can get the desired reports.
Well, I'm happy the line ministry is here, so at least the PS would be hearing some of your concerns and we could be addressed. The other question, you stated that the CICP has on board a qualified medical practitioner and a senior clinical psychologist who has worked in the mental health sector for nearly 4 decades. Has there been any instances where the board has dealt with mentally ill applicants?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we have some experience with some mentally ill persons, and we treat them with respect, and then we would indicate that in the report, which is submitted to the board, and they would make their decisions based on our report.
Yeah, and again, according to the Act, it says that a medical doctor has to make the application for a mentally challenged individual. And in engaging with mentally challenged persons, I mean, we have had, for those that we have encountered, it has been really challenging. I would say it was challenging even upon persons who have training, such as in psychology and counseling as our members of staff, but it's always challenging because sometimes even to have a coherent conversation with some persons is challenging, right? But the act speaks on persons who are mentally challenged. The medical doctor are the ones who would file the applications on their behalf.
Thank you. But you stated also that the CIC addresses the needs of victims only to the extent of easing the material needs of the victims and their dependents. That is, so in what other ways is the CIC Act inadequate? Has the CIC been made further attempts to submit amendments to the CIC Act?
That is pertaining to the needs of the victims?
Yes.
Right. Well,
you could put it in writing if you don't have it available now, because we're kind of looking at the time also. So this is just something we wanted to help us with our final report. And I was just, in fact, somebody had WhatsApp me a question in the sense that if you have a victim of domestic violence, emotionally abused, reported it to the police that they are verbally, emotionally abused, would that victim also be considered for this $25,000? Because I'm thinking this may be a way we can get victims of domestic violence to leave their home, in the sense that some of them are hesitant to leave. They don't know where they'll go, if they are safe houses. But I'm thinking if your body can actually lay it out to the public that you are there for them, even though they are psychologically and emotionally abused in a home, you may get more people stepping forward, because there are a lot of cases of hidden, it's like a hidden epidemic of domestic abuse. So do you also entertain cases like that?
I can't recall that many.
yes, so Chairman, the crimes are against specific, which applies to the Act, right? So we have mainly serious crimes, murder, manslaughter, wounding. It really covers serious crimes and not so much the emotional, because being in the field, it's really difficult to gauge the emotional, except we will have a report from a psychologist, or as the case may be.
Yes, sometimes these individuals, we have gone to a practitioner and actually lay claim that they have been, being stressed out, anxiety, depression, whatnot, and you may have those reports in before. So I think this is something, again, we need to explore, because your unit can actually be a unit that can help those victims that are home and not being able to come out. And, at least we could give them a hand to break that cycle of violence. And as we are running out of time now, and I'm thinking that if any of my members would like to ask any further questions to the committee or to the ministry. Okay, I see no hands up. So at this stage, I would like to ask, Mr. Pascal, if he can give us some brief closing comments.
Chairman and members, as I said before, we remain grateful and we are happy for your intervention, your invitation to be with you today, because we in our own settings over the last couple of months have been considering outreach and a little bit more advertisement, a little bit more putting ourselves out there. So we are glad to be with you so that we could bring the workings of the criminal injuries compensation to the wider community. We have heard all your admonitions this morning, your suggestions, your advice. We take them on board. We would take all steps necessary to catalog them and deal with them as best as possible. When it comes to the amendment of the Act, it's something that it will be big on my agenda, in that we have to meet with our line ministry. They may want to enlist the help of the Law Reform Commission, as the case might be, because this might be a little bigger than us right now. We've seen that this Act has not been amended since 1999. And there is, in fact, a number of little things inside here which, if amended, could make the operations of the unit much better this year. Chairman, have a good.
Thank you. Well, I think we have an AG. If you knock on his door, I think he may be willing to help you to get this act amended. And at this stage, would Mr. Gary Joseph, the Permanent Secretary acting in the Ministry of National Security, give us some closing comments?
Chair members, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to assist the committee in its deliberations. The Ministry of National Security is in fact committed to working with the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board in ensuring that it meets its mandate, and we will take into consideration what has been shared today in charting a way forward that will improve on the efficiency and effectiveness of the operations of the board. If you permit me, Chair, I just want to make mention when Ms. Lakshmi Dayal had raised the issue of the revisions to the legislation and so, there was in fact a bill that was piloted in 2007 with some of the revisions, I would imagine, which the board may have previously requested. So it may not mean starting right over. There would be something in place. So we have to pull that bill now. It was left in abeyance and it lapsed in 2007. So we will pull that bill and see exactly if some of the concerns that were raised here today, if those concerns were in fact captured in that bill of 2007. And secondly, as it relates to the assistance that's being offered and the need to increase the levels of compensation, I would just want to add that it's not only the CIBC would be in fact providing assistance to victims, but there are also other state players involved, for example, the Ministry of Social Development. So we would need to look at a bigger picture in terms of what support is being provided. So I thank you once again, Chair and members of the committee, for affording us this opportunity today.
Well, at this stage, I think we all realize that the persons out there, the victims out there, need us to be there, need us to actually advertise your services at the CICB to know that there's something out there that the government can help them with. Be it even 25,000, little bit, at least let them know that there's something there, somebody who can care. So at this stage, officials, I sincerely thank you all for being here. Officials of the CICB, Ministry of National Security, for your contributions. We're all here to get something better for our population. So I thank you all, and I hope we can get something coming out of this that could give further assistance. Committee members who participated, I thank you for being in this virtual hearing. Staff of the Office of the Parliament for your procedural and logistical support, the viewing and listening audience. So at this stage, I'd like to declare this meeting closed. Thank you all.